Have you heard about Lift Up Your Heart? Last month, the Magnify community gathered in Plano, Texas and Phoenix, Arizona. And it was a day of speakers, live music, and the opportunity to sit and chat with women who wanted to reconnect with Christ. And we had the opportunity to capture some moments on our Magnify mini mic, and we want to share that right now with you. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the Magnify podcast producer, and I'm here at Lift Up Your Heart. And I'm going to go around with my mini mic and get some mini mic Magnify moments. Megan, tell me something about the music you love today. I'm not getting up there.
I just love her voice. It's like unique. It's not one that, the jazzy kind of sound. I just love it.
What did you write on your miracle inventory sheet? Was there anything that stuck out to you?
I had a special needs son. He passed away about 7 years ago, and he's my number one miracle.
What was something that you felt like was said up on this stage just now that you thought was meant for you?
That whatever we're going through, that our Heavenly Father is there for us and He got us.
If you have FOMO after listening to this, don't worry. Lift Up Your Heart has more events coming this fall, and our next event is Idaho Falls on October 12th. You can head to the link in our show notes and register now, and as a Magnify podcast listener, you get a special discount code. Details are in the show notes, and we can't wait to see you there. Now, on to the show.
Hello, Magnify sisters. I am Brooke Walker in the hosting chair today, and we have the chance today to dive in deep into a topic about the temple. And I've been thinking in preparation of today's conversation and podcast about the reasons we go to the temple as women. And from what I know and who I know, I believe that most people are serving in the temple for three core common reasons. To feel peace. We know the temple is a place of peace. We know the temple offers us a chance to serve, and we're promised the temple can be a source to receive revelation, to get answers. But I'd never thought about the temple as a hospital where people come to be healed. So when we were presented with the idea from today's guest, I was immediately intrigued. Today on Magnify, we're discussing how to make the temple a more intentional, meaningful, healing experience in your life. We've brought in that expert to this topic. I'm joined today by Dr. Wendy Ulrich. Wendy is a psychologist, professor, and author. Her book, The Temple Experience, Passage to Healing and Holiness, provides part of the basis of our conversation today. I'll share up front a few fascinating things about Wendy. She and her husband were mission leaders in the Canada-Montreal mission. She has served as a member of the Relief Society General Council. She has 3 children and 10 grandchildren. That's a fun count to consider. And finally, Wendy says she is trying to stop loving chocolate so much, which, Wendy, you have a lot of brilliant ideas. I don't know if that idea is so brilliant. Do we have to stop loving chocolate? Do we have to? Must we?
Well, maybe stop loving it as frequently as I do would be a good move. But
removing it as one of the core food groups in your diet?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
You and I share that love, and we share a lot of other connections, I'm sure, through testimony and through our covenants and through Jesus Christ. So I am so thrilled to meet you through the screen today. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, I'm so glad to meet you as well, Brooke. Thank you for all that you do to help make the world a little better place for my children and my grandchildren and me. So thank you.
Oh, that's kind. That's kind and gracious. You're welcome. Thank you for saying that. So I'm going to assert myself early here with an outside observation, and you tell me if I'm accurate in saying this. I read your book. And from what I read and from what I've learned about you prior to meeting you today, I would say 2 things. I would say you are a confident daughter of God. And I would also, here comes the assertion, I would also say your work as a psychologist has given you a really unique lens toward the temple. It would appear you look at the temple a little differently, I think, than a lot of women. And I see your expertise in the intersection of emotion and psyche coming out in how you interpret the temple experience. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is fair. And I certainly don't want to pretend for a minute that that's the only lens through which to look at the temple. There are lots and lots of ways, and we each have our own angle on it based on our own life experience, based on the things we are interested in, the things we care about. But because of my longstanding interest in the human psyche and things like finding meaning and symbolism and healing and those kinds of things, yes, I see a lot of that in the temple, and I'm really inspired when I do, because I think I think the Lord is giving us a glimpse of how he sees us and what he wants to do in our lives.
So give us the framework. Just give us a synopsis or a summary of that lens. How do you view the temple?
I think one of the ways that the temple became most meaningful for me personally was from a quote by Elder John A. Woodsoe, an apostle of previous years. But he said that no man or woman, and he did say man or woman, which I appreciated, given the time frame he was coming from, can come out of the temple and doubt as they should be, unless they have seen beyond the symbol the mighty realities for which the symbol stands. And when I first saw that quote or read that talk that it came from, I kind of was thinking, I had been kind of thinking of symbols in terms of, 7 equals wholeness and green equals life. And, that's the sort of what the symbol stands for stuff. But I was really intrigued by the idea that there are mighty realities, not just intellectual constructs of A equals B, but more like, what are the mighty realities in a beautiful painting or a beautiful piece of music that touch our hearts and touch our souls, and that we see from different places, given who we are, that touch us at different places at different times. But those mighty realities are more things like, how do we get healing in our lives? How do we get rebirth spiritually? How do we become a holier people? So for me, I really love that the words healing and wholeness and holiness all come from similar roots. And because healing was kind of an important idea for me into getting into psychology, I certainly resonate with that. But beyond just healing is a sense of wholeness, of not being splintered in 1,000 directions, and then ultimately a sense of holiness. How do we become more like God and really prepared to meet him, which is what I think the temple is all about.
Your words are so lovely. They're so poetic. And I love how you presented this synergy and this word chain for us, from healing to whole, wholesome, whole to holiness. That's a really beautiful progression to consider. And under the umbrella of healing, there's some breakout promises that you feature, that you highlight in your research and in your writing. You said in the book, quote, "The temple helps us regain momentum and direction when we become paralyzed. It offers relief and calm when our hearts race amid life's challenges. It teaches us of God's most powerful healing promises." And here comes the spinouts: forgiveness, sanctification, resurrection, and redemption. And that quote from your book made me think of a promise from our dear prophet, President Nelson, when he said, "Nothing will soothe your spirit more during times of pain. Nothing will open the heavens more than the temple." So make for us, if you will, that correlation of healing. To think of the temple as a hospital might not be a natural reflection point, but you very much see this as a hospital type environment for our spirits.
I do, and I don't think that's the only thing by any means. But it's fascinating to me that in virtually every room of the temple, every aspect of these ordinances, we have sort of a death and a rebirth in the baptistry. We often talk to 8-year-olds about, you're going to be clean. And I think sometimes we miss as adults that there's another layer, for example, in baptism. Joseph Smith sort of explained the baptistry and the temple is on the bottom level. It's sort of in the basement, is the idea.
Physically located.
Yeah, physically located in a different spot, because it's where the dead are wont to be. That's kind of the idea. This is a going down into a watery grave and coming up again as a new person with new parents who are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. We have a new name. We are taking upon ourselves the name of Jesus Christ. We join a new community. We're becoming a different person than the person that we were from our natural mortal birth. We're not just returning to the spirit world of who we were, but we are becoming something we couldn't have become without coming into this world. But we still need to sort of lay aside some of that natural man and woman and be born again in Christ. So in the baptistry, we see this sort of descent and then coming back up again. We go into some of the initiatory ordinances of the gospel, and we go from feeling, kind of being reminded that we belong to the blood and sins of our generation. And this is a place to become, well, sometimes the analogy I'll use is if you ask any 6-year-old, what do you do when you cut your finger? They don't have to be very old before they've figured out, well, you wash it and then you put something on it, like Neosporin or something. In other words, you put an ointment on it, you anoint it, and then you put a bandage on it. And the inside of that bandage especially is always going to be white. It's going to be clean. It's going to keep it from getting infected again, is the idea. And so when we begin to see, I don't know, some of the spiritual realities of, okay, I come here from this world that I live in. Yeah, I got reborn when I was 8 or a year ago if I'm a convert, but it's hard to live in this world without getting cut and hurt spiritually or physically or emotionally, and symbolically sort of bleeding all over ourselves, or other people get hurt and they bleed all over us because they don't know what they're doing either. And so we come in prepared to be filled with the Spirit, to be washed and anointed as they would wash and anoint and clothe priests in the ancient temples of Israel, to prepare them to serve in the temple as priests. And we are being prepared in the same way to serve as priests in the temple on behalf of our ancestors, on the culture that we come from.
Yes. Can we expand on that idea of the daily cuts that you described? I think the word healing, and this is more of a secular interpretation, but it sometimes lands heavy. Like you think of a gaping, obvious wound.
Right.
And so for the woman out there who says, gosh, I love the temple. I want to go to the temple. I want to serve in the temple. I want to find peace and all of the promised blessings from the temple. I'm not necessarily in need of being healed. What would you say to her?
I would say fantastic. But I don't know too many people, as you said, who don't experience the daily cuts, the little ways that somebody hurts your feelings, the way that some part of your head is talking to you in a way that's kind of demeaning, or that the voice of what you think is, the right voice that you're supposed to listen to isn't telling you you're not good enough, or you did that wrong, or you sure made a fool of yourself there, or whatever it may be. The worries we have about our parenting, the worries we have about our parents, the caretaking roles that we end up in, whichever generation, up or down, we're involved in that with. All of these things that we're a part of, you can't even turn the TV on, without feeling a little wounded,
Feeling broken.
feeling a little like, what is going on in this world? And so those are the kinds of daily assaults that I think can really cause us to feel the reality that we are in a lonely, dreary world sometimes. And we need a break, and it may not be that we're going for some huge insight into our psyche. I'm not saying that, but that we're going to find that peace. We're going to be regrounded and recentered in the calm, curious, compassionate part of ourselves, instead of these little subparts that are kind of yelling at us or undermining us or telling us, what we're doing wrong or why we should be mad or whatever it might be.
You had a sweet story in the book that resonated with me and kind of underscored that point of the daily cuts. You were, if I recall, leading the music in Relief Society, and you looked out at your sisters in front of you and realized that there was one sister that was, again, not a huge wound, but causing these little flicks or these little pokes to your spirit.
Yeah.
And it became that realization that there was a healing that needed to take place in that Sunday relationship.
Absolutely.
And I found that super relatable. Again, the little cuts or the little pokes.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was sitting there smiling at me, and I was sitting there thinking, don't smile at me. I really, and the very just clear, I mean, this was an ongoing challenge. There were things that she'd said and done that hurt my feelings. And I'm sure there were things I'd said and done that hurt hers. And this little voice in my head said, you do not compete. And I was like, compete? What?
I'm just leading hymn number 2.
Oh, oh, and it just hadn't really occurred to me that I had sort of seen this as a competition, that I was
Yeah.
supposed to be more like her in ways that I didn't know how to be. And I felt like I was failing because I wasn't. And that was not really fully conscious in my head,
Sure.
but I sort of had this sense of, she made these choices that were different from some of the choices that I made. And now maybe I'm bad and she's good. And, and it was just such a sweet little moment of, I know you, I know her. This is not a competition. Stop. You don't need to go here. Let that voice in you step aside and recognize it's not needed here now. It can be healed.
I like that example because there you go, healed. It can be healed of competition, healed of burdens, healed of minor, moments of pride or whatever we're suffering, dealing, grappling with. There comes a healing in that, or a need for a healing.
Right. And so again, as we go into these different places, these different aspects of the temple, we see this sort of somebody messes up. I think when I went to the temple the first time, I was expecting to just see a lot of Jesus. And we see a lot of Jesus in the temple, but it's not necessarily really obvious. We don't learn about his life. We don't hear about his miracles. We don't get reenactments of the Sermon on the Mount. And I think somehow I was kind of thinking, and we see these Adam and Eve people who make all these mistakes and, do these dumb things. And I mean, I'm overstating that, but I think, we see us. I mean, this is our story. Their story is our story. And their needs for reconciliation and for clarity and discernment and being able to recognize the voice of the adversary and say, yeah, that doesn't sound right. And just being able to really see that the fall that they experience is a fall we experience on a pretty much daily basis. But how do they get out of it? And that's what the temple teaches us. It gives us the big picture. It reminds us there's a plan. It helps us feel that peace. It helps us see you can fix this. You come out of hiding. You reconnect with the Lord. You try again. You go back into the fray. It's always been sort of funny to me that they just figure out sort of who the adversary is in the Garden of Eden, and then he's right back at it. They get sort of sent on their journey, and it's like, okay, try again. But it's not now you've got it all figured out. Try again. It's okay. He got you this time. He's going to be right back at it. Try again. And the next time around, they don't separate. They stay together. They support each other. It reminds me of the need for community. They try to do things together. I love all those beautiful verses in Moses. They pray together. They work together. They teach their children together. They are truly united again. And this time they get it a little more right, and they're able to.
But it's that cycle of growth and progression that we're experiencing on a daily basis.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So in the temple, we kind of do these descents, and then it teaches us how to learn from that drop, that fall, that descent, and climb back up again. And then we kind of keep seeing rows and rounds of that throughout that experience.
You talked about the theme of community in the temple, which was interesting. I've never actually isolated or gleaned that, but you do write in the book about the temple being this connection point to God, to ourselves, and also to others. And there is an emphasis on the physical act of the ordinances, especially considering that we do work for the dead, we do work for others. Can you talk a little bit more about how you focus on your physical body, that physical body connection while you're serving in the temple?
Well, I think it's really interesting that ordinances are not words. I mean, there are words in ordinances, but there's no ordinance that we have that doesn't have a physical component to it. Someone lays their hands on your head. Someone dunks you in the water. You reach out and you take bread and water and you put it in your mouth and you digest it. There's this physical part of every ordinance. It's not just about teaching. Well, one way to think about it is the whole left side of our brain is where all our words come from. So it's not just about all the words. It's about the whole other side of our brain that does not use words, that sees the big picture, that understands the look on somebody's face, that goes for a deeper level of understanding. And we need both. And ordinances typically have both. But ordinances happen to your body. And they remind me of how important our bodies are. In most religions, the body is kind of the enemy. The body is sort of what gets in the way of your being spiritual. And sometimes we get kind of pulled into that view as well. But we have this crazy theology that says God has a body. He wants us to have a body. Ordinances of salvation are only available to people who have bodies. And if you don't have a body, you're dependent on someone who does to do that ordinance so that you can participate in it and accept it and get your body back again in the resurrection that Jesus Christ offered to us. I've run into people who will swear up and down that we don't believe Jesus was a resurrected being. But yet when I say we absolutely do believe that and we believe he still is, are a little uncomfortable with that idea. Okay, well, yeah, he resurrected, but that was mostly to just show people that, that there's life after death.
It was display only.
It's not really like he's in a body again. I mean, that was just because that's what we can understand. Well, yes, we do. And we believe that those bodies that we have make us more like God, not less. So I think the temple does a beautiful job again and again of reinforcing this has to be done in your body and it's done for because we are not, the temple buildings are not what God is interested in. He is trying to make us temples where the Spirit of the Lord can dwell. And that we are the temples, capital T temples. The building is the lowercase t temple in my mind. The Lord wants to dwell with us and wants us to dwell in this body and make it something that we will hold on to for eternity. So those are powerful concepts to me.
Very powerful. That's a thinker. That's a beautiful thought line. And you touched on this. I've never really considered our view on the body as a unique, distinctive ideology of our religion and our church. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's we have some unusual understanding of our relationship with our bodies and the relationship with God, with his body as well.
How does the temple heal relationships? Wendy, we touched on this kind of the small little interpersonal flinching that happens or the natural man-woman reactions that come out as we interact with people who are or are not like us. But how do you see the temple being that promoter of healing relationships and deepening those connections?
Great question. There are a lot of places we can think about that. The fact that we go to the temple, basically we go to the temple as a single person, which is kind of interesting. I mean, even if a woman is married and she's going to the temple for the first time, her little name tag is going to have her maiden name on it.
See, and that was one thing that surprised me. You talk about the temple being you expected more Jesus or Jesus storyline in the temple. I was surprised, that we sit by ourselves.
Yeah.
The name tag on our shirt. That surprised me the first time I went through, I remember.
And I think that's really important for our single brothers and sisters to know they don't need to feel like there's something weird about them in the temple. That's for sure, because everyone there is single. I mean, I'm going through for someone else. That person I am going through the temple for and providing those ordinances for is single until they get to the sealing room. At the very end, they are single, and so are all of the rest of us. But what's curious is that once we are endowed, we are fully endowed. The sealing ordinances are the only ordinances I know of in the gospel that you can do for someone else, even though you have not had those ordinances for yourself. The sealing ordinances themselves, of course, remind us of the importance of relationships, but they're not the only place. I feel the relationship I have with these women that I'm doing these ordinances for and acting as a priest, basically, on their behalf in providing and officiating in that ordinance for them when I'm there. And that's the language that President Nelson and President Ballard and others have used. You officiate in the ordinances of the temple every time you go, not just the person who is sitting at the front of the room or pouring the water on your head or whatever it might be. You are the one, you as a person doing this for someone else, you are officiating in that ordinance for them. So we have the relationships of us to the dead, the people we are doing these things for, members of our family. I try to be prayerful about the people I'm going through for. If I know them at some level, I usually don't anymore because the ones that are close that I knew are done. But if I know anything about where they lived or when they lived or what their circumstances were or whatever it may be, I'm prayerful that they will be able to receive what I'm offering to them, what the Lord is offering to them, when they are ready for it, and that they will know it's offered with love.
And what a generous extension of the work that you're doing and the testimony that you carry, that to pray that they will receive. I think we all think of them, we consider the time period, we consider the name, the language, whatever, but to really sincerely open your heart and pray on behalf of that person, that's lovely.
Well, and it reminds me of the importance of that word, receive. Am I going to receive? Am I open to receiving? Am I going with open hands to receive what the Lord is trying to give me there? What other people may be offering there, what the Spirit may be whispering to my heart, what the answers may be that might come there or might come as I'm sitting in the celestial room reading the scriptures for a few minutes or praying, or that might come 2 months later when something clicks in my head, that where that answer comes. But that we go with the opportunity to specifically make a list of people we want to pray for, that we go with the opportunity of coming together in a part of the temple that I think represents sort of a millennial reign, a terrestrial kind of viewpoint. We come together in prayer and that we unite to pray on behalf of current people and issues in our lives, not just past things that are the old story, but what's going on right now in this world, that we have a responsibility and a desire to come together and join our faith to make a difference in this world for good, to build Zion, to be peacemakers.
Wendy, why do you think there's such a wrestle around this idea of spiritual healing? You do define a difference in the book. Healing is a different process from curing, right? Healing versus cure. Why do you think, though, when the healing you describe is so beautiful and is so whole and feels so in line with what I want for myself here in mortality and also in the life after, why the wrestle? Why do we wrestle with that spiritual healing process?
Tell me more about that, Russell. What do you see that looking like?
Well, I think it's interesting as you dissect those small little daily cuts. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's justification or if it's just the pace of life in which we live, but it's so easy just to let them slide by when what you're saying is those little cuts deserve our attention too, right? Part of this mortality, part of this mortal journey is to refine ourselves and define ourselves as disciples of Jesus Christ. And so I hear the undertone here being as you heal, however big or small the wound may be, the cut may be, you do become closer to Jesus Christ. And that's the goal. So why am I so quick to dismiss the little stuff that seemingly doesn't matter in the here and now?
Well, sometimes it doesn't matter. And if you can get away with that, run with it,
Less and dismiss.
Yeah. I personally have a harder time with some of those things. They linger for me and I want them to be gone, but then I'd have to stop and think about why they're there in the first place. And why is this bugging me so much? And I don't want to do the work. I don't want to have to feel it long enough to figure it out. And so those are some of the things that I think stop me. It's like, I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be scared. I don't want to think about those things. And if I'm going to really do something about them, as opposed to just brush them off until they come back around again, I may have to do a little bit of that kind of work. Sometimes there's some shame that's involved when we feel like there's something in us we're not handling perfectly, and we buy the adversary's advice and counsel, run
We
and
drink the
hide.
juice.
Yeah, we drink the
Yeah.
juice, or we get mad and it's somebody else's fault, or we take that route, or whatever it may be. But I went to some training with somebody this last week, and he was talking about the external things that hurt us and the internal things that hurt us. And those external things we need to work on. When the world is hurting you, when you're being abused, when things are not fair, of course we need to work on those things. But he said, there's nothing inside of us that can have power over us unless we are afraid of it. And I thought that was very provocative. I think it's true that sometimes it's because we're afraid in some way. We're ashamed of it. We don't want people to know about it. We don't even want to know about it. We just want to move past it and not think about it. But unfortunately, some of those things continue to haunt us, and some of those things continue to haunt our relationships with others as well.
Which brings new lens to the scripture, fear not, but it's fear not, go to work. It's fear not, roll up your sleeves and take the effort.
It's actually perfect love casts out fear. And I think that's one of the scriptures about fear that's especially provocative to me. Okay, is it perfect love for God? Is it perfect love for another person? How do I get to that perfect love? Because I may not be there right now. There are people who show up on my television set that I'm not perfectly in love with, that I'm kind of mad at.
I won't ask you to elaborate on that.
No, I won't. But,
Okay.
there are people who show up at the grocery store sometimes I'm not perfectly in love with. And I'm not perfectly in love with me. And so perfect love is something worth aspiring to. And I think I don't want to overemphasize the idea of healing in the temple, because I think it's also calling us, as we talked about, to wholeness, to holiness, to being a better version of ourselves,
to whole love,
to a deeper sense of our relationships with others and with the Lord.
I'm soaking you up, sister. This is so good. Can we end, Wendy, on a note of hope? We talked about kind of the correlating words you've linked together for us: hope, wholeness, healing. What role does hope play in the healing power of the temple?
The first thing I learned as a psychologist was if you can't help people feel some hope, then you can't really get anywhere. Hope is a huge factor. But it's kind of interesting to me that hope is sort of this forgotten sister in between faith and charity. We talk about faith, hope, and charity, and we know faith in Jesus Christ is just so important. And charity is the most important quality we can get to. That's the love of God. And then we have this little thing called hope that's sort of in the middle, and we're like, okay, hope,
The forgotten sister. That's such a sweet way to say it.
But I think it's extremely important, because I think the hope is that I believe in Christ. I believe in God. I believe they're perfect and wonderful. I believe charity is a wonderful quality to have. I should be more charitable. I'm not more charitable. I need that. Somewhere we have to tie those two together. And I think the hope has to be that I can be someone I can love, God can love. I can be someone who can grow in my capacity for charity. And I can trust him with this kind of broken, inadequate person that I feel I am so much of the time. And I don't need to pretend I'm something that I'm not. I can have hope, not because I'm perfect, but because he is. And not because I'm so enormously lovable that I qualify as, a charitable person, but because he does. And his charity and his mercy for me are enough that he knows how to fix me. He knows how to teach me. He knows how to redeem me. He knows how to take this mortal experience that I have, that you have, that somebody in countries I've never been to, have never heard of God have. And in eternity, he knows how to take those experiences and use them to teach us to be more like him. And I believe that he will. That is my hope.
Amen. I have just relished in this short time we've spent together. The Spirit works through you quickly, sister, and the way you teach and articulate it is really a gift to all of us. So thank you so much for sharing your light and testimony.
It's been a delight to be with you. Thank you for your thoughtful, well-articulated comments and questions that speak for so many of us in terms of what we're trying to understand more about the temple and about the world.